Guys, welcome to Savvy Programmer and welcome to the iOS beginner tutorial. I'm very excited to teach you today about functions. We're going to go ahead and talk about functions, which is one of the most important thing in programming. So let's go ahead and open Xcode, and if you go to hold down Command and press spacebar and type in Xcode, you should see Xcode pop up. So launch Xcode. Xcode's not popping up for me. So another way to get to Xcode is if you click on Applications and then go to Xcode here. Double click on it. Okay, so I got Xcode and I go File and New. And we're gonna go ahead and open the playground. So I already have one playground here. I'm just gonna use that. Alright, once you have playground open, it should load. Xcode has been behaving really badly right now, so I'm gonna do it again. Playground. Go next and select playground 1. Create. Okay, great. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about functions. And functions are basically just like this. So if I go ahead, you start with the keyword func and you name it anything you say. Launch rocket. And you start with a parenthesis open and parenthesis close, and you put a squiggly line open and then squiggly line close. And this basically is the function. Whatever happens inside this function is inside its own scope. So what that means is if I were to say print, if I were to initialize a variable, remember we talked about variables, say name John, right? And I cannot access this name anywhere else. I can only access it inside this function. So if I go ahead and I can do launch rocket because I have already, so whatever I declare, whatever methods or functions I declare, those ones basically are can be accessed outside. But if it's a variable, I can't access. But I can just do is the print name, and when I call this function, it would print name. So express it. There you go. So you got John. So you can also, another thing with function is you can pass parameters. So what parameters are, like, let's say I say launch rocket 2, and I can say I want the name of the rocket name, and I have to say what type it is. So I'm gonna say it's a string, and I want to have the how many rockets, right? The count. So I said just count, and I know that's an int. So what I'm doing is I'm passing a variable to the function. So if I were to say print rocket name, so remember we talked about concatenation. So if I say rocket name is, I can open, put a quotation mark, say rocket name, and then say rocket name here, and rocket count. So what this function will do is, if I just were to call it, it will basically, I have to give it the name. So what happens now, I'm calling the function and I'm passing the parameters to that function, and it's being replaced So the rocket name is being replaced inside here, and the count is being replaced inside here. So I'm just gonna say rocket name is rocketer, and I'm doing count of 1. So if I go to run this, see, so it did the rocket name rocketeer now, and it did this one too. So I can go ahead and do a lot of execution inside a function, and I can also, another thing with function, what I can do is I can do a return. So let's do launch rocket 3, but this time I want to return something. So I want to return, you can return any type. So you can return a string, you can return an array, you can return, remember we talked about arrays last time. We can return any type. So I'm going to say, but you have to specify what type. I want to return a string. And so now it's going to tell me what missing return, because you told me to return a string. So I'm saying return, you say return, and you say that whatever is hello or rocketeer. So what's going to happen is when I call this launch rocket 3, it's going to return the string type. So watch what's going to happen. So it's going to return the string type. There you go. So it's let me go ahead and open this for you. So it says rocketeer. See? So if you look at this here, rocketeer. So it's returned what I told it to return. I can also return anything I want. Like let's say I create like a variable there. I do some execution and return something else. Let's say I'm counting 2 numbers together, right? So sum 2 numbers, right? num1, num2. They're both integers, and I want to go ahead and calculate those together, and I can return the sum of 2, so the number 1 plus number 2, right? And I can also say concatenated and say return I can either return a number or I can return a string with the number. So I just return a number, so that's just going to be an int. And if I run this, yeah, you have to always put an arrow when you return it. My mistake. So number 1 and number 2. So if I go ahead and say sum number 1, number 2, and you say sum 50 and 55. And if I run that, 1 of 5, see? So that's what you use. So you can use, like, instead of like having bunch of code, like say print this and do this and this, like you use a function and you have a return type. Another return type that you can also use in functions is, it's called tuple. So you can return more than one type back. So what you can do is say func sum 3 numbers. So I'm going to say num1, num2, and num3. So I'm going to return a tuple. So I can return a tuple means you will start with a parenthesis open and parenthesis closed, and you say that it's an int. So I can return all 3 numbers at the same time. So how do I do that? I say return whatever I was giving num1, num2, num3, and I'm not going to do anything with it. I'm just going to return this just for exercise. So I show you that you can return more than one. You can return more than one type only when you use a tuple. So tuple is, so if I were to say, call the other function, simply numbers 4, 6, 8, and if I were to run this, see, it returned 4, 6, 8. But so now I can go ahead and say some, and I can say which one I want. Dot the 0th. So if I say 0, I'm gonna get the 0th number, which is the 4, right? Or if I say dot 1, I'm gonna get the second number, 6, and then I'm gonna, if I say 2, so it's 0 base 0, 1, 2. It's kind of like an array, but it's not an array. It's different type. It's a tuple. Tuple has its own. You can also mix data types. So you can have a string, an int, and an int. See? Alright, so that sums up functions. That sums up functions. So next tutorial we're actually gonna get into classes, and that's gonna be our last tutorial before we start the game. So if you have any questions, go ahead and post it below. And always, I would love you if you could subscribe so we could get notification on like any kind of videos that I upload. You can get notification. I upload every week. So that sums this tutorial. I'll see you in the next tutorial. Thank you.